Tuesday. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Advance. I'm Brandon Waltens, Senior Editor here at Texas Scorecard, joined as always, or almost always, with Michael Quinn Sullivan, our publisher here. And today is the 106th day, okay, just so people remember where we are, the 140-day regular session. And we've talked a lot about how the House hasn't done a lot, I would say, especially compared to the Senate in the first months of the session. Now I would say the House is doing a lot in the sense that they have a lot of bills on the calendar. Today's especially is pretty long. Looks like they'll probably be here well into the afternoon, maybe the evening, voting on bills. But there's actually not a lot really being done, I would say, as far as substance.
My grandfather used to say that when you're standing out on the plains and you see a big wall of dust, it can be one of three things. It can be an advancing army, it can be an approaching storm, or can be an idiot running around in circles. All right. And I feel like maybe we're getting the third right now out of the Texas House. As you said, Brandon, there's a lot of stuff that they are doing. And in fact, I can't recall seeing as many tears and as many, emotional pleas on the House for things that frankly affect no one, for things that are, of de minimis value, but this big show, this big emotive show on the floor of the Texas House, while the real work of the people of Texas is kind of bottled up in committee.
Well, and part of the reason, especially now, if you look at the calendar for today, one of the reasons we have so many bills, but I would say are bills that people didn't campaign on, most Texans, 99% of Texans wouldn't care about, is because leadership decided last week that when faced with, you had conservatives in there saying, look, we're not going to pass these Democrat bills on this, essentially this fast track calendar. We're not going to allow Democrat bills to be fast tracked on there unless we start seeing Republican priorities. In response, leadership said, okay, well, you're not getting your Republican priorities. We're going to make sure that we spend the time today, and this is why they're going to go so long, passing these, to make sure that we pass these Democrat bills, which is what is the situation we're in today. I think that's what's so frustrating to a lot of people.
Well, but make no mistake, it's not just bad Democrat bills are taking up time on the calendar. There are a lot of bad Republican bills on the calendar. Now, you might say, oh, Dade Phelan's not a Republican. Well, he is. He has an R next to his name. But we're being treated to a couple of pieces of legislation moving through the process, including one this week, Brandon, that is an attack on political memes.
Yeah, this is one I can't believe. Honestly, I'm
it felt like a joke. It felt like a joke when he filed it.
Not a lot surprises me, I guess, when it comes to the way the Texas legislature operates. But this one, I have to say, I am surprised a little bit that they decided to take this all the way to the floor. This is House Bill 366 by Dade Phelan, now Representative Dade Phelan.
Hey, that number 366. That number strikes in my head for some reason.
Yeah, so that was the number of votes that Dade Phelan won his race by. Of course, you had many more Democrats than that voting in the primary there, but that's neither here nor there. And so he files this bill, and as you would expect, it's very much a retribution sort of thing for what he experienced during his campaign. This legislation would essentially regulate and criminalize, in some cases, unregulated memes, essentially. So this all started, there was a mailer that went out with Dade Phelan and Nancy Pelosi, saying that, Dade Phelan and Nancy Pelosi, drawing some comparisons there. Pretty tame, honestly, in the way you see political mailers, something that people are used to. But Dade Phelan apparently very thin-skinned about it. He wants to throw those people in jail. That's his reaction. And so you've got that bill on the calendar today that would essentially, if you don't disclose this and that, you can't use any sort of not just, people say, oh, well, this is dealing with AI or deep fakes. This is even rudimentary Photoshop. I mean, a representative from the Texas Ethics Commission during the committee hearing admitted that no, this legislation actually goes even farther than Dade says it goes.
And so not only do you have him going after this, you also have him legislation. I think it's on the calendar for later on in the week that will make it so that if you send a mass text, now mass text is not like necessarily some server you pay for, but if you send a text to 5 or 6 of your friends from Sunday school telling them that you're going to be voting for someone for some office, and you don't then put these magic word political disclaimer on there, you also could find yourself in hot water with the state.
Right. And you see a little bit of a theme here that again is well being filed by Dade Phelan. These are all, it's kind of sad in a way to see that even after he ekes out his campaign, right, is able to make his way back in the House, isn't Speaker, of course. And what is he spending his time on? Well, it's all bills dealing with, the campaign from a year ago. I will say this, bills have to pass 2 chambers, right? You have to pass the House and the Senate. I think that looks like, the Senate, I would imagine if I were a betting man, would surely be a firewall against some of this from Dade Phelan, but we'll find out soon enough.
But does though go, whether these things become law or not, these become really good markers for who your state representative is, for what they believe, for what they're willing to do in Austin to appease who they perceive to be their masters. Unfortunately, a lot of guys in Austin see themselves as working for the speaker, working for the kind of the cabal of lobbyists and former legislators, rather than working for you as a voter. And when you see them take these votes that would criminalize you for making a silly picture of a politician and post on the internet, that would criminalize you for telling your friends in Sunday school who you're voting for without some weird political disclaimer, that tells you who these people are. Particularly, maybe, Brandon, them knowing it's going to be dead in the Texas Senate, knowing it's not going to go anywhere, but they're still going to vote for it so they can look good for the speaker. That tells you who your state representative is.
Well, and it's important for another reason, because where we are at the timeline here, look, we've got 34 days left in the session. We're hitting some deadlines here soon. In a couple of weeks, you'll have the actual deadline for the House to pass House bills. And then, things move pretty quickly after that.
Right.
We're now at a point in the session where, honestly, if they fill the calendars, which, you would expect that they would do, they'll probably spend a good amount of time on the floor every day between now and those deadlines, I would expect. We're now kind of approaching that zero-sum time, which means that every bill that is being debated on the floor means that another bill is not. Right. And so the time they spend debating a bill banning memes, right? A bill that I would look at and say is, blatantly unconstitutional. A lot of people look at that, say this surely has no chance. That's time that they're not talking about ending in-state tuition. Or they're not talking about, meaningful property tax reform or relief. These are the stakes. There's another bill, by the way, on the calendar also for today, not by Dade Phelan, but in a similar vein by Carl Tepper up from the Lubbock area, that would essentially, if a candidate for office makes a mistake, doesn't file their finance report on time, or has a problem there, they would actually allow them to be removed from the ballot. Which is a pretty big deal, especially, when you look at local offices, especially. Right. Some of the filing requirements are a little bit hard to figure out. You're running for school board or running for city council, maybe in a small town. The fact that if you mess up, you don't cross a T, dot an I, your political opponents can have you ripped off the ballot. That's what they're debating today.
Yeah, these are the kind of things, again, that I think that as for kind of rank and file Republican voters, for people who who have moved to Texas because they thought this was a conservative state. Just go down the line. All these folks who they expect the Texas legislature to be addressing serious issues impacting their lives, and instead you see it kind of as what you find is the Texas House anyway is operating more as a retribution vehicle for guys who are still upset they didn't get to be the 7th grade class president or something. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Capitol, you've got the Texas Senate. I think they're now about to pass their 40th of the Senate's priorities. They've cleared through, I believe now, all but one of the Texas GOP priorities. The Texas Senate, meanwhile, is getting things done. They're almost at the point, Brandon, I think, where the Texas Senate could say, okay, we're done. We're going to just go home for the next couple of weeks because the Texas House just has not delivered.
Yeah. And you look at, what do we have going on this week? Well, you might see that, some committee hearings are still going on for in the House, certainly, and in
for another
the Senate,
2 weeks, probably
for another 2 weeks. But here's the issue, right? So the actual deadline, technically, I believe is May 12th,
right,
is the last day that House committees can vote out House bills to be heard on. There's a deadline a little after that for whenever Senate bills come over. But when you're talking about bills in the House, May 12th is the day they have to get out of committee. That's the actual deadline. In a practical sense, though, deadline's much earlier. And in fact, at this point, I would say, Tom Glass, speaking with him last night, he put out a good email dealing with some of these timelines yesterday. He put it that, if it doesn't get voted out of committee by May 1st, probably doesn't have a chance in the House. Even I think that's maybe a little optimistic. I would say certainly if a bill hasn't had a hearing at this point, it's probably dead in the Texas House, which means that you're going to see, what does that mean? It means that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, probably a lot of conservative legislation being heard in committees. This is not a victory, right? Having a hearing on a bill is itself not a victory. It's not, we at least got to explain the issue. No, I would argue that the only victory is having those bills pass and be signed into law. And that anything they can do, and this is what happens, right, is they'll slow it down. So we'll have a late committee hearing. Maybe they'll vote it out late. It gets on a calendar late. Anything they can do to stall that process. This is what we're seeing now. And that's why I think you're going to see so many conservative bills being given committee hearings all of a sudden at the last minute.
And in fact, they play this game to shut up conservative members because they will take this legislation and dangle it at the very end of the last calendar, hoping that it will shut people up about the bad stuff. Let the bad stuff go through with the barest of hope that maybe the good things get done. Remember, this is a Republican dominated chamber, the Republican House, 86 Republicans nominally anyway in it. And yet they're hanging till the very end, anything that the conservative grassroots want, mainly so they can ensure the bad stuff passes.
Right.
And this is where I think a lot of folks kind of need, we all like to say, I don't care about the rules, I just want things done. Well, the rules matter. It's like saying, I don't care what the rules are, I just want to watch the football game. Well, that's the only way you can enjoy a football game is if you know the rules. And I think this is where each one of us have to make sure we understand the rules so that when your legislator comes to you in June, July, August, and into the fall, telling you that, they ran out of time, telling you that they had a hearing and they would get to it in 2 years. What they're telling you is it wasn't really a priority for them and for their masters.
Right.
I think each one of us as voters have to understand the process so that we can all do a better job of holding them accountable. All right, Brandon, we're coming up here on the end of our time together. Yeah. You mentioned, though, that you saw Tom Glass yesterday. You saw him in Bastrop. What were you doing in Bastrop?
Speaking of the Bastrop County Republican Party, great group of folks. Absolutely love being able to go out there. And it's always a nice little trip. It's not far from Austin, but you feel a little bit, right? Like you're a little bit away from it.
So if you would like someone from Texas Scorecard to come and address your group organization, go to texasscorecard.com, click on the little tools box, and you can see how to request a speaker. Someone from the team would love to come to visit your group, texasscorecard.com, and click on the speaker request button. We'd love to see you there. For now, thanks for joining Brandon Waltens and me here on The Advance. Have a great week.